Good morning, everybody. My name is Laszlo Simity. I'm the Director of Technical Services in EMEA, which of course is Europe, Middle East and Africa. What I'm going to do in this session is really build on the topics that Matt raised with us this morning around gaining and creating a world of digital confidence. I'm going to look in more detail at how we can make that happen. We're going to look at how Source Labs can help you gain this digital confidence, and we're going to look at the pro. We're going to jump into the demo of our platform and have a look at how that we can actually make that a reality. In the previous session, Matt spoke about how the app is the customer experience now and how critical it is that our apps work flawlessly for our customers every single time they use it, 24 hours a day, on any device, browser or operating system that they wish to access our application on. And this is really critical for our business. If an app doesn't work, if it doesn't look beautiful, if it's slow, then our customers may choose to go with a different organization. So it's really critical that we get this right. And this creates some challenges for us in software development. Whether you're a software developer, you're a QA professional, you're a tester, you're a test manager, you're an SDET, whatever your title is, the reality is the challenge for us today is how we make sure that our app works on all those different devices, OSs, and browsers, and how we can unblock our CI/CD pipeline, allowing our organization to move faster, release code into production more quickly. And so this is really where Source Labs can help. Source Labs has essentially all of the environments that you need to test your application on. And we have 4 different categories of environments. All of these are scalable, they're always on, and they're available for you to test from anywhere. The 4 categories we have are headless browsers. Firefox and Chrome browsers available in a headless mode, enabling us to get early indications in test early on in the software development lifecycle, so getting very fast feedback early on. We also have desktop browsers and operating systems. These are full virtual machines with the standard desktop browsers that you might expect. There's over 800 different combinations of these desktop browsers and operating systems available on our platform, and we're going to have a look at some of those in just a few moments. I would just mention as well, for those that may have heard of Source Labs some time ago, these are actually hosted out of our Frankfurt data center in Germany, so we have a local presence for these now. We also have mobile emulators and simulators. I think there's around 200 different types of emulators and simulators. And as Matt was mentioning, these are really a very highly valid way for us to test our native mobile apps or mobile websites at scale. And if you need 100 concurrent sessions in order to complete your testing really quickly, mobile emulators and simulators are really the way to go. Finally, of course, we have our mobile real device cloud. We have thousands of mobile real devices in our data centers based here in Europe, in Berlin, and in the United States, with hundreds of different configurations of device available. And we'll have a little bit of a look at some of those possibilities in just a moment. And I just want to hit on something that Matt said as well, and that I'm calling out here. We're in the midst of an unprecedented, really tragic global pandemic. And many of us are working from home. Same at Source Labs, we've moved completely on to a work from home model as far as practical. And many organizations we're talking to who have previously had real devices in their office that enable them to do testing or debug or development are now struggling to make sure that they can continue doing development and testing when everyone's working from home. And cloud options like Source Labs can really help you in this way. And real devices are not just about testing, they're also about development. So connecting real devices to Xcode and Android Studio, enabling you to debug and develop applications using devices hosted in the cloud. We also have productivity tools to enable you to find and fix failures fast. So we have analytics giving you insight into the tests that you're doing on the different devices that may be important, and how often they're passing or failing. And we'll look a little bit into these insights during the demo. We also have videos and screenshots. So making sure that when we do a test, we're able to understand actually what happened in the application during that test, particularly if there's a failure. Debugging capability, particularly with logging, enabling us to very simply go in, find out if a test failed, find out what actually happened during that test, and find either debug the app or our test script as required. Finally, of course, we actually allow manual live testing, which is what we call manual testing on the different categories of environments we offer, so that you can just go in, try something out manually yourself and see what happens. This can be particularly helpful for production debugging type activities as well as standard manual and exploratory testing. Most of what we'll talk about today is functional testing, and most of what I think people on this call will be familiar with is, of course, and live as a day-to-day thing, is functional testing. Does the application do what we expect it to do? Can a user buy a flight? Can a user transfer money between their accounts? And this is obviously really important and what most testing on Source Labs is, but this isn't the only thing we do on Source Labs. The other thing we do is front-end performance testing. So understanding how the performance of our application in a browser changes over time. So as we change the front-end code in our browser, what does that do to the performance of that for the user at the end, at the front end? We also have visual testing. So not just making sure that we can navigate functionally through the application, but also looking at, does this application look beautiful on all of the different environments that our users will expect to be able to use that application on? All the different devices, all the different browsers, all the different operating systems. Of course, underpinning that is enterprise security and support, making sure that we provide a truly enterprise-grade security, secure platform, and also a world-class support organization. So we're not just providing you with or flinging you some software and hardware. We're also making sure that we both know and can effect change in your organization that enables you to achieve your objectives in test. And it might not just be in test. It might be in speeding up your CI/CD pipeline, getting code into production more often, more quickly. It might be just unblocking test in your software development lifecycle. These are all things that we help our customers with every day. So obviously, we looked at how you can do manual testing. So you'll click around in the application yourself manually. But most testing on Source Labs is using automated testing. And automated testing on Source Labs can use one of 4 different test frameworks. You can use Selenium. Selenium is the most popular web automated testing tool in the world. It's obviously there's probably somebody on here who's ready to correct me to say Selenium is just a web automation tool, which is true, but it is most commonly used for web browser testing. We also have Appium. Appium is a kind of offshoot of Selenium, if you will, that allows us to test mobile native apps or mobile websites on real devices or emulators and simulators. So it's essentially the Selenium for mobile devices. You can also use XCUI test or Espresso test scripts with Source Labs. These are the native test frameworks of iOS and Android respectively. And so these will be familiar to your app developers. And you can take these tests that you already have or build them new, but take tests that you might already have in these 4 different tools, and effectively you point them at Source Labs. This is very simple for Selenium and Appium, where you simply change the WebDriver URL, the capabilities, and send through authentication. So it's a small set of changes. And what happens then is your script will have instant access to secure use virtual machines and clean devices. So if you want access to, for example, Firefox 4 on Linux or the latest Google Chrome on macOS Catalina, you can simply request that in your automated script. and you get access to that within a few seconds, which we'll see in just a few moments. Obviously, this allows you to improve quality with coverage. So you'll get access to many more different browsers, operating systems, or devices than you could have locally. If we just think about web for a minute, I'm running a Mac. I cannot run Internet Explorer because obviously that only works on Windows. So this Source Labs enables me to get access to the kinds of browsers I wouldn't have otherwise. It also takes away that stress and effort of needing to ensure that my browsers are at a certain version so that I can test them. You just request the browser, a specific version, and operating system. Source Labs takes care of the rest. The other power in using Source Labs is the ability for us to increase velocity by testing in parallel. So we can take our existing test script, which might run in one window in serial locally, and we can actually start testing in parallel. So testing 16, 20, 100, 1,000 different combinations of devices, operating systems, and browsers at the same time, meaning that we're not increasing the test execution time in total. We're actually increasing the coverage, but no extra time. And obviously we can review, share, and debug the results, and we're going to have a look at that right now. This is the Source Labs interface. Source Labs, you can see it's a nice, simple, fresh kind of interface, quite a clean and uncluttered. The very first thing I'm going to show you with Source Labs is running a manual test. So let's go over to live here, which you remember is Source Labs' term for manual testing. And I'm going to choose cross-browser. Cross-browser means I want to test a website. And you can see as soon as I click that, there are 3 different tabs: desktop, mobile real, and mobile virtual. The one we're standing on right now is desktop. This means I want to test on a desktop browser in a virtual machine. Across the top here, you can see the different browsers that we offer: Firefox, Chrome, Edge, Safari, and Internet Explorer. And for each of these, lots and lots of different versions, right back to Firefox 4 and lots of really old versions of Chrome, along with the latest, the beta and dev branches as well. This backlog could be helpful if you need to do production debug. You get that ticket from a user who's using some horrible old version. You can go within a few seconds, you could be testing on that old version on Source Labs and reproducing that. When you click on a specific browser and version, you get to choose an operating system. And this obviously varies a little bit depending on which browser you select. Safari, of course, only runs on Mac, and IE only runs on Windows. But let's choose Chrome 83, the latest. We can see the different versions of Mac OS I could run that on, and the different versions of Windows. So why don't we go ahead and just start a session now with Chrome 83 on Mac OS Catalina. When we click Start Session, what happens is a virtual machine is allocated in the cloud for us, and the version of Chrome, in this case, that we have selected, will be run up in a small window in our browser. So you can see here that I am now testing on Chrome 83, and we can have a quick look at that. You can see here, this is Chrome 83, and you can see we're in a Mac environment, and this is a Mac OS Catalina environment. And so I'm able to interact with this browser window, just as you'd expect. I'm just going to use this particular sourcedemo.com site. I'm just going to log in as a standard user here, and you can see this site enables us to basically fictionally buy some cool Source Labs swag through an online shop. And you can see that as I click through this is just like it's fast. It's just as if it's kind of local to me, but I have access to all of those 800 different varieties of browsers. Okay, so we can also take screenshots during our manual test, and manual tests on Source Labs on browsers automatically record a video, and you can manually take some screenshots as you see here. So you always have access to what you've done, and you've got a record of what occurred. Let me click stop here on this session. What happens now when kind of uniquely at Source Labs, what we do is whenever you start a virtual machine session on Source Labs, this is a brand new virtual machine. So every single time a virtual machine started, it's a brand new virtual machine from a template. When you stop a session, that session's virtual machine is destroyed and we retain certain test artifacts, which I'll cover in just a moment. So you can always be guaranteed of the security and test state at the start of your test. Let's flick over to mobile reels. So these are the different mobile reel devices that I could now test my web application on. And you can see that we have a very broad range of different types of mobile reel device for us to test on. I think there's something in the order of 300 different types of device configuration. Of course, we prioritize having a large number of different devices for you to test on, but we also have always the very latest devices. Typically, same day, you can see the brand new iPhone SE is in the data center here, typically the same day of its public release. We also have different versions. So if you want an iPhone 6 on iOS, 11 and 12, we have an iPhone 6 with those different versions so that you always have the right devices and versions to test your application on. Finally, we have mobile virtual devices, which we've covered a couple of times. And these are emulators or simulators. They are the same emulators or simulators that you can run in Android Studio or Xcode, but they run in the cloud. And the benefits of running these in the cloud is mainly to do with scale. Well, it could be partly to do with compatibility with your laptop. If you're on Windows, you can't run iOS simulators, for example, but mainly about scale. So if you need to run a large number of automated tests really quickly, we can do that by running all of the tests in parallel in a large set of different emulators, simulators. You can do that very simply with Source Labs. Now, of course, most tests on Source Labs are completed using automated testing. And as I was mentioning, automated testing, we allow a number of different test frameworks: Selenium, Appium, XCUI test, and Espresso. I'm just going to show you very briefly an automated test based on Selenium for a web page. The web page I've automated here is in fact that page we saw just a few moments ago, the sourcedemo.com. This particular script is built in a framework called WebDriver.io, which is a JavaScript-based WebDriver framework. You can see I'm using the Mocha language here, so it's very simple for us to read what my test does. It loads the home page, checks we're there, enters a username, enters the password, clicks the login button, double check logged in, and then it logs out. And so I've got 3 different tests that I'm going to do here. This smoke test we just went through, some tests on the login page, and also a full checkout where I'm going to order some Source Labs swag. This particular framework makes it very simple for us to test on Source Labs. I just need to provide my Source Labs user, my Source Labs access key, and the region in which I'd like to execute my test. And then I just need to instruct Source Labs which browser and operating system I want to run my tests on. In this case, I've selected Chrome version 76 on Windows 10. And then confusingly, I've mixed up the order of the parameters here, but bear with me. Microsoft, and then also I'm going to test each of these 3 on Microsoft Edge, the latest version of Microsoft Edge on Windows 10. So let's just kick those tests off now. And you can see that it's starting 6 tests because I've got 3 tests times 2 different browsers that I need to test. And you can see immediately that my tests have begun executing on the Source Labs platform. And in a few seconds, you can already see that my smoke tests have on Edge have completed, and they've now all completed within a few seconds. The screen you're looking at now is known as test results, and it does what you've just seen. It shows us the recent automated tests that I have completed on Source Labs. It shows me the name of the test. Let's use smoke test because we saw that example in my code. We can see whether a test passed, how long ago it began, the browser, the operating system, the browser and version, and also how long the test took to execute. When we click into a particular test, we get to what's known as the test details page. You'll notice that the biggest portion of this page is taken up with this video. Videos are automatically recorded for all Source Labs tests. And we can see this particular test executing on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, what you can see is the commands view. These are a list of all of the different WebDriver calls my script has sent to the platform in order to test the application. Now, these can be considered to be steps. So these are the different steps your test is going through in order to test your application. So we can see for each of these the place in which our test was at the point in which that call was made. So the video will update for us. And I'm afraid the demo gods have struck me. I'm just going to quickly pop here into the Chrome version. There we go. So whenever I click on one of the commands on the right-hand side, what actually happens is the video updates with that point in time. So at the point at which I was entering the value secret source, you can see what actually happened on the browser at that particular time. You can see we annotate the tests as well, so I know that all of these commands underneath this source swag smoke test logs in are related to me attempting to log in to the application. We automatically also record screenshots for whenever the DOM of browser changes as a result of actions we've taken in the application. So screenshots are automatically recorded. And again, these are tools that enable us to understand what actually happened in our application during our test. We also have many logs which allow us to debug our automated test or perhaps our application. We also have some ability to download the screenshots that were automatically recorded in a zip file or also download the video that we created there. So you can see how easy it was. All I needed to do was send through which browser and operating system I want to test on and a username and access key, and I was able to begin testing on Source Labs. We had all of this richness of data automatically recorded for us. So automated testing, you saw me testing in parallel, can also, it's also possible for us to group our automated tests into what are known as builds. So this it has most applicability where we're running tests as part of a CI/CD pipeline, as part of some build process. And you can see an example here. I have some tests running as part of Jenkins. The name of my job is Laszlo EUDC source demo, and the build number was 5462. And if I click inside this build, you can see that I've grouped the 4 tests I ran as part of this build in Jenkins into the one screen. So I ran 4 tests, all of those passed. We can see their name, their status, the operating system, the browser, and how long each of those took. This can be really helpful because going into Jenkins and looking at a failed build, I can now just simply go into Source Labs, have a look at the build page and understand all of the tests that were run as part of that build. We also have some plugins for Jenkins that give you that visibility as well. Okay, so let's move on now to our insights. I just want to show you a couple of reports in here. The first is Test Overview. Test Overview shows me, as it suggests, an overview of all the testing that I've completed recently on the Source Labs platform. You can, by default, it selects the last 7 days, but you can select different time periods. And the first thing that it shows me here is a snapshot on my test case health. You can see I have 2 tests consistently pass, and I have 3 tests that have inconsistent results. So it implies that they are constant, perhaps flaky, something like this. We can see in the last week how many test runs I did in total, how many of those passed, how many of those failed, how many just completed. This is likely to be manual tests. At the bottom, we also get a breakdown on which browsers we're testing on. You can see I am overwhelmingly just testing on Chrome, which is probably a little bit naughty. But this gives you an overview and maybe gives you some action to start testing on other sorts of browsers. And also operating systems. So again, I'm overwhelmingly testing on Windows. I should probably be testing a little bit more on Mac to get a more holistic view. So this gives us a kind of 30,000 feet view on the testing that we are completing. When we want to start zooming down, we can use test history. Test history requires us to enter one specific test name. So this is that test that I walked you through in my code and that we looked at through the test details page, the smoke test. For this particular test, for the last 7 days, I ran this test 129 times. I had 1 failure and average runtime was 6 seconds. And down the bottom here, you can actually see we've plotted each individual run of this test. So this particular test here, you can see, was run on the 3rd of June at 14:15 my time. It passed. It was on Chrome 83 and on Windows 7. And if I click on that dot, actually I can go straight out to have a look at the video, and this link takes me to the test details page so I see the full details. This report can be really useful to understand trends for a specific test over time. Is the test execution time increasing? Is it decreasing? Are we having more failures or less failures? Are we testing this particular test on the requisite number of different browsers and operating system combinations in order to get a really good view on the application functionality? Very finally, I'm just going to show you trends. This is another report showing us a really high-level view on all the testing we do on the platform. The total number of tests that we've run during the last week, the total pass failure rate broken down into individual days. So you can see on this particular day, on the 6th of June, is that right? No, on the 9th of June, I'm sorry, flicking between American and real dates. You can see we passed 147, we failed 3. And if I'd had any errors, errors would be displayed down here that would enable me to take action. And these are typically actions in our automated tests. Finally, at the very bottom, we can also see all of the tests that we marked as being part of build pipelines and whether or not we've leveraged enough parallel sessions in order to reduce our test execution time down to the absolute minimum possible. We can also zoom into these by scrolling, by essentially scrubbing in. So I'm now scrubbed into a very specific day, the 9th to 10th of June, and you can see it's now broken down into individual hours. So each hour of that day, what happened, and we can see that actually something happened just during this particular hour that caused 3 of my scripts to fail, which we could then, of course, continue to drill into and understand what happened. We can see these 3 tests failed for some reason. Why don't we just pop in here and have a quick look. I can see that it looks like there was some issue with me entering the username in this particular case. Okay, so that's a very quick demo of the Source Labs platform. I hope you found that interesting. I'm going to stop there now and just ask if there are any questions.
Hey, Laszlo, we have some questions on the chat that Andy's been trying to get to. But might be good just to run through for everyone if you want to just peek in there.
Okay. So I see the first question was from Andrew saying, regarding desktop, can the hardware specification of the virtual desktop be configured? the testing could find issues due to the desktop being under spec. So we have a standard hardware profile for all of our virtual machines, which is pretty easy to see. When you go in, you could see that I could actually open up the system info on Mac, or I could go into device manager on Windows. They're pretty well spec'd. I think we've gone up to 4 gig of RAM lately and a couple of cores. We find that this is effective for practically every workload that we've seen so far, but we continue to take feedback and advice about how we could increase the speed if necessary, or if there's some other specific use case. We haven't lately had any feedback suggesting that this could be issues during to the desktop being under spec. So I think this is a very unusual, very unlikely situation at the moment, but if you have any different experience, then please let us know. Guillermo asks, could we see a video with that test? Unfortunately, I'm not quite sure what. I think actually, if I think about it, maybe Guillermo was probably asking a video of the test that I ran on automated testing, which I hopefully was answered a little bit. If that's not the case, Guillermo, please pop into chat and let me know if there's a different question. Andrew again asks, for a desktop, can an OS patch level be selected? We don't generally supply images with specific patch levels for desktops, with a few exceptions on the Mac side. Again, certainly there are some cases where the patch level for the operating system does matter in terms of the browser, but in general, the browser and high-level operating system is probably just about good enough. Misha asks if we can create tests in Source Labs, or I can only use existing test automation script. So effectively, in Source Labs, you can take your existing Selenium or Appium scripts, or you can build them. Source Labs doesn't have a specific tool to enable you to create these Selenium or Appium test scripts, but there are lots of tools out there on the market that enable you to very easily create Selenium and Appium scripts, either from scratch through an IDE, you saw me using code, or through other sorts of tools. And we have partnerships, for example, with companies like Ranorex here in Europe, which provide sort of IDEs that simplify creation of these scripts. Guillermo asks again if we can export the video, which I think we asked. Yes, you can absolutely download the video. And I see Andy's answered all of those tests. Misha then asks if we can use WebDriver IO tests. In fact, Misha, you probably saw that my test that I showed you here is WebDriver.io. So yeah, very simple to run WebDriver.io tests on Source Labs. It's very easy. WebDriver.io simplifies a lot of the configuration for you, actually. Okay, I think that was all the questions we've run through very quickly. Is there any other questions? I see a couple here. Can we manage how long our data is stored? So it's stored, it's a fixed amount of time on Source Labs. So we store your videos and screenshots for 30 days, after which they're removed. And we store metadata, like which test you ran on which browser and which operating system. We kind of store that almost indefinitely while you're still a customer of Source Labs. You can manage that a little bit. So videos and screenshots, you can always delete at any point through a REST API if you wish.